Good evening, I'm Lawrence O'Donnell, and this is tonight's Last Word live from Los Angeles. No one got fired in the White House today. No one forcefully escorted out of the building by security. Every cabinet member who had a job at breakfast today still had that same job at sundown today because the President of the United States spent his 104th day playing golf. And so far, the golfiest president of all time has not actually fired anyone while playing golf, except possibly some caddies who are not on the White House payroll. Many inside the White House are reporting that this week the White House staff has moved beyond worry to near panic that the President of the United States is now completely unleashed. That is to say, somehow measurably more unleashed than he already was. And it's all about the woman who had to suffer the worldwide humiliation of a public Trump kiss yesterday, actually, on her way out the door. Just watch how natural this is. That was Donald Trump, reduced to sign language because he needed to keep that far away, a great distance away from reporters so that he would not be able to hear any of their shouted questions about Stormy Daniels or anything having to do with the governing of the United States of America. The White House did not release a translation of the sign language. I, for one, have no idea what it means to stand beside a person and just point at her repeatedly. So please feel free to share any of your suggested sign language translations with us on Twitter. The woman the president was pointing at is the youngest White House communications director in history and not the most incompetent, only because she was preceded in the job by the unforgettable Anthony Scaramucci, who was the most unleashed White House communications director in history, as well as the most incompetent. The New York Times reported today there is a palpable worry among those in the West Wing about who the president will now confide in and how many other people might be able to occasionally pull him back now that Ms. Hicks is gone. Several reports have indicated this week that White House Chief of Staff John Kelly has lost whatever confidence the president had in him and is unable, therefore, to exert even the minimal amount of influence over the president that he might have had in the past. According to Politico today, the president announced that he was firing the Secretary of Veterans Affairs in, quote, a snap decision that surprised his own chief of staff and knocked the government's second largest agency deeper into disarray. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly had spoken with David Shulkin by phone Wednesday morning, reassuring the now former VA secretary that he wouldn't be fired by tweet that afternoon. Hours later, Kelly had to phone Shulkin again, telling him plans had changed. David Shulkin's firing was so chaotic and of a sudden that it is possible that Donald Trump didn't even know that Donald Trump was going to do it earlier in the day when Donald Trump spoke with David Shulkin.
When's the last time you spoke to him?
I spoke to the president yesterday.
What was that conversation like?
We spoke about the progress that I was making, what I needed to do from a policy perspective to make sure that we were fixing the issues in VA.
Wait, that's before you were fired?
That's correct.
You spoke to him. He made no mention of the fact that he was about to terminate you?
That's correct.
And then you found out via tweet?
Right before that, the Chief of Staff, Kelly, gave me a call, which I appreciated, gave me a heads up, and so, but that was much after the phone call.
The Trump administration has always been choosing from the bottom of the Republican barrel of talent, and there is no possibility of that changing. According to a report in the Washington Post today, the Post reports that the Presidential Personnel Office, which is responsible for recruiting and vetting thousands of Trump administration political appointees, is being run by, quote, a college dropout with arrests for drunken driving and bad checks, and a Marine Corps reservist with arrests for assault, disorderly conduct, fleeing, and officer. The Post reports that the personnel office, quote, became something of a social hub where young staffers from throughout the administration stopped by to hang out on couches and smoke electronic cigarettes. Leaders hosted happy hours last year in their offices. In January, they played a drinking game in the office called icing to celebrate the deputy director's 30th birthday. Icing involves hiding a bottle of Smirnoff Ice, a flavored malt liquor, and demanding that the person who discovers it, in this case the deputy director, guzzle it, thereby bringing a more precise definition than ever to the term drunk with power. But the governing style of the Trump administration, a more serious version, is always a more serious version of drunk with power. This week, we learned that Team Trump will begin detaining pregnant, undocumented immigrant women, thanks to a Trump executive order. It will add a question on citizenship status to the census that state attorneys general warned could lower immigrants' voting and cause a population undercount. And it will roll back rules requiring cars to be cleaner and more efficient. Donald Trump is golfing when most of these decisions are made and only becomes aware of them if they are mentioned on Fox News, and only approves of them when they are mentioned approvingly on Fox News. The Trump government from the start has behaved like a marauding horde, passing a bottle of Smirnoff Ice as they reach to the bottom of the right-wing barrel of bad policy ideas and try to turn another one into the law of the land. Hope Hicks never stopped a minute of that madness, and John Kelly is known to have encouraged some of it, especially the worst cruelties the Trump administration has inflicted on immigrants. Each of them might, at some point, have talked the president out of an utterly insane tweet, but what Donald Trump has proven from the start with his 2 White House chiefs of staff and his 5 White House communications directors is that he has been unleashed since day one in the presidency, but is always capable of getting much, much worse, and always does. Joining the discussion now, Anna Marie Cox, the host of the podcast With Friends Like These and a political columnist for Fangirls. Also joining us, Daniel Dale, Washington correspondent for the Toronto Star, Jason Johnson, politics editor at TheRoot.com and an MSNBC contributor, and Jonathan Capehart, an opinion writer for the Washington Post and an MSNBC contributor. And Anna, I want to begin with what seems to me, from my distance, the mythology of Hope Hicks, created by the White House press corps, which seems to believe that she is, first of all, a confidant of Donald Trump's, and secondly, that without her, things will be so different that the president will be lonely and petulant, and therefore we're going to see something completely different without Hope Hicks there, making it all make sense.
Well, because he was so not lonely and not petulant before, right? I mean, if Hope Hicks is all that's standing between us and oblivion, I mean, we're already in oblivion, right? I mean, the abyss is looking back at us. I thought your summation of what's been going on was really spot on, because in the end, it's not the theatricality of the dismissals. It's not, sort of the, I don't want to use the term on television, but the blank show in the White House. It is actually all the bureaucracy that's kind of like tumbling apart, and as it tumbles upon people, sort of the detaining of pregnant women, the questioning of citizens on the census. They're doing this thing where they're rolling out the abortion reversal medicine is starting to become. They're starting to push that in more states, and that is something that the Trump administration is behind. There's all these like minor changes in policy, or what seem like minor changes in policy, that are all but invisible because we're all paying attention to what's happening in the White House. But people are suffering and hurting. I am like everyone else. Like, I can't take my eyes off this either. I can't take off, the spinning, the whirling dervish of Trump in the White House. But I really feel like we need to be looking at what's happening in more cities and towns. ICE breaking down people's doors, black men being shot in their own backyard. These are the things that are happening in part because Trump is such a terrible manager and terrible president. But let's not get distracted by him. Let's pay more attention to actually the things that actually also some things that we can have some effect on, because they are at the local level. I hope people can take some actual hope in that.
Jonathan Capehart, the notion that the Trump White House can become more chaotic, more dangerous, I guess that's true, that it can. But it's hard for me to believe that that has anything to do with who the White House personnel actually are.
Oh, yeah, this has nothing to do with the personnel. Well, in a sense, Lawrence, it does. The one person that we've been talking about since Election Day, and that's the president. I mean, there was so much hope put into John Kelly. Even I was one of those people who said, you know, now that John Kelly is there, he will bring order and discipline to the White House. I also said his firing of Scaramucci would be the height of his career. But now what we know from the Twitter firing of former Secretary Shulkin yesterday, President Trump is going to do whatever he wants to do. The crazy that's happening in the White House, in the West Wing, is something that would be untenable for any other president, and certainly something that was unimaginable for a Republican president. But to Anna Marie's point, I'm separating the White House from the administration. And those policy changes that you mentioned in your lead-in, Lawrence, those are things that it's not about the bureaucracy falling apart. It's about the nationalist agenda that buoyed President Trump into office that is actually being implemented despite the chaos in the White House. And this is where I, again, agree with Anna Marie that we have to pay attention to all these little things that the administration is doing. While the dumpster fire on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is happening, there are these people in all these agencies enforcing these rules, changing regulations that, you know, cheer the president's 35% base, but have real impacts on millions upon millions of everyday Americans who thought life was proceeding in one way and just upended just by the stroke of a pen.
Jonathan, we all accept your Good Friday confession about having once been hopeful about John Kelly's ability to organize this White House. It was unnecessary, though. I wasn't going to put that up there in front of your face. But let's listen to a Republican presidential campaign operative, Steve Schmidt, giving his assessment of this personnel situation.
From a personnel perspective, we've never quite seen the assemblage of crooks, just outright weirdos, wife beaters, drunk drivers, complete and total incompetence that's been assembled. If you took the 10 greatest HR managers in the history of the world, put them together, and said, we want to form a 1927 Yankees of incompetence, it's not possible that they would have done a better job than assembling this team, and it's not possible that this team could have let loose more chaos than they already have.
All right,
and Evan is exactly right. As we get close to the hour of tragedy that will inevitably come from these type of people around an office where life and death decisions are made.
Jason Johnson, I'd like to say he took the words right out of my mouth, but it's much more eloquent than anything I could have come up with. And, of course, wife beaters and drunk drivers is not rhetorical. It's literal. He meant it literally.
Yes. I look at this administration, it's like it's like a police academy. Just there's a level of incompetence. I'm waiting for a guy who makes voice impressions and someone with a squeaky voice. Like, that's the only thing left that they could put into this administration to bring it any lower. But here's the thing, Lawrence, and here's the larger problem. All of the competent people in D.C. and around the country who don't beat their spouses and don't have criminal records and aren't trying to abuse the body public, they don't want to participate in this administration anymore because they don't want it on their resume. So it's not only caused problems in how our country will function, but it's made it more difficult to attract competent people. Usually a year into the administration, people have kind of figured things out. They know where the bathrooms are. They know where the copy machine is. We've still got people who haven't even settled into their offices yet, and they're already being fired for incompetence. So this will eventually leak out, not just from a policy perspective, but there will be economic and voting decisions that people are going to make because of the nonsense they see in D.C. right now.
Daniel Dale, I really want to get your perspective on why the White House press corps, I have my own ideas about it, but why the White House press corps seems to mythologize Hope Hicks as some kind of anchor in the rough sea of the Trump White House.
That's a great question. You know, I don't have a good answer. I think, you know, she's young, she's glamorous, she is relatively friendly. The couple times I've spoken to her, you know, she's been more pleasant than other people in the Trump administration. I think it's possible, Lawrence, that, you know, to some extent, she did mitigate, at least temporarily, some of Trump's worst instincts. But I think we've seen a general tendency towards mythologization of many, you know, Trump aides. I mean, we saw this at the beginning with John Kelly. We see this still with Steve Bannon, who's treated, you know, as a political genius when there's very little evidence of that. And so I think there's a tendency in the press corps that covers the White House to see the people in the White House as you know, these heroic figures in various ways when there's very little evidence to confirm that at all.
Daniel, in your experience with the people at the White House, do people like Hope Hicks realize that before the age of 30, she has written the first line of her obituary, and it is not a good one?
Well, let's you know, I don't know if that's true. I think she has time to make a name for herself in some more flattering light. But it's very possible that this will be what she is remembered for. And you know, it has not been a good era.
Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I got to tell you, no. Like, there's a difference in saying, hey, I may have had a bad boss, and saying I used to work at Enron, okay? If you, you know, and this is that situation. Like, if you have White House 2016 to 2020 and beyond on your resume, ethical people don't want to work with you. They don't want Robert Mueller checking into their background. Hope Hicks has severely damaged the rest of her career. Now, mind you, I have no sympathy for her. She helped write letters to help damage the reputation of women who are only speaking out against abuse they'd had in the past, but anybody who's going to be connected to this administration is going to be tainted. And I don't think Donald Trump realizes that, but all the competent people who don't want to work there anymore, they do.
And Daniel, what do you expect in this infighting that we're hearing about on the communications director job? Do you think it's possible that Donald Trump really will just leave that job empty and in effect continue to be what he's always been, which is his own director of communications?
Lawrence, I think anything is possible with Donald Trump. I think, though, that he values communications more than anything else, more than any policy area. I think he wants to fill the job. We know that, you know, almost nobody wants what should be, you know, a hugely, you know, glamorous, desired position. I think it's possible Kellyanne Conway will get it. We saw that her husband deleted a series of anti-Trump tweets that he tweeted this week. And so, you know, what we've seen this week with all of his positions is that he's falling back on people that he personally likes over, you know, that's more important to him than any qualification. And so we saw that with John Bolton, who he likes from Fox News. We saw that with Larry Kudlow, who he liked from CNBC. And we saw that with Mike Pompeo, his new Secretary of State, you know, who he liked from his intel briefings. And so my guess is that he will fill the position, and he'll fill it with someone that he personally knows and likes.
Daniel Dale, thank you very much for joining the first round tonight. Everyone else, please stand by for more. Coming up, the special part.